Hey everyone, welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today on the show I have Sarah Kenner. Sarah is a violinist and food blogger who has garnered a huge audience on Instagram of 13,000 followers, who tune in for both music-related posts and food posts tying into her blog, The Hungry Musician. In this interview, we talk about nurturing a hobby and growing an audience around it, and how that can potentially have a huge impact on your career. If you've ever thought about taking a second love outside of music to the next level, you'll get some inspiration from Sarah on this podcast. Before we start, I'd like to thank Fix Music for sponsoring Crushing Classical Podcast. Fix Music is your online resource for high-quality sheet music at great prices. There are some new offerings at Fix available that you'll want to know about. Now there's organ music, a large choral music selection, as well as orchestra parts that you would need for concerts and auditions. And now, they are actively working with choral and orchestra directors to help plan seasons. So if you're a program director and you want some help on choosing pieces for your next season, contact Fix Music today through their website. And as always, free shipping on all domestic orders. Check out fixmusic.com for your sheet music needs and use the link in the show notes to receive 10% off your first order. Let's get started. Hey Sarah, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast ever, so I'm really excited to be doing this.
Oh, that's so awesome. So Sarah is a violinist and food blogger. I found you on Instagram since I'm spending so much time on there, finding new people to interview and also just interacting on the app. And I was blown away. You have 13,000 followers, and I'm like, okay, what is this? You're hungry. I know that because your handle is the Hungry Musician. And so you're a violinist, but you're also a food blogger. So when did you get interested in, well, we're going to dive into all of this because it's so interesting. You're doing two things at once on an Instagram, which I think is great because double the audience, right?
Yeah. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when did you get interested in cooking?
I have always loved to cook. Even when I was a kid, really young, maybe even before I started playing violin, I would love to cook with my family in the kitchen. I was always coming up with recipes. Obviously, some were good and some were not, but it was always one of my favorite things to do, just kind of go in the kitchen, see what was there and what I could make with it.
Did you make up recipes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was a kid, it was mostly dessert. But as I got older, one of my favorite things to do in elementary school was come home and watch Food Network. And
Nice.
so I would see the chefs on there doing things, and then I go try it. And so over the years, I kind of just taught myself how to cook.
That's great. So, and
Yeah.
what about violin? How long have you been playing the violin?
So
Like we're talking
21
like,
years.
right,
Yeah, I guess.
like
I
age
started-
3 or something, right?
Yeah, I was 5 when I started. I'm 26 now, so it's been a while.
A whole life endeavor. So tell me,
Yeah.
give us a little background on your music career. Where did you start out with? Because you're just getting finished with a grad degree, right?
Yes, I just graduated. I finished my second graduate degree in May.
Wow, second.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
so where have you been? What's your whole school story?
So I started getting serious about violin. I mean, I was always, serious about it to some degree, but I really decided I want to do this professionally, some point in the middle of high school. I ended up at Temple University for my bachelor's degree in music, which was a wonderful school. While I was there, I got introduced to early music, which is the performance of, Baroque music, classical music, etc., on period instruments. I didn't end up doing that for my first master's degree. I went to Manhattan School of Music and did just a classical violin master's.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I really missed doing the Baroque violin thing, so I decided to audition for the historical performance program at Juilliard, and then I got in, so I went there did that 2-year program, and now I'm out. I'm working. I'm doing the thing.
All right. So what
Yeah.
are you freelancing, or is there a focus on early music in your career right now, or what are you doing for your out in the real world stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm freelancing mostly.
Hmm.
And for the most part it is on period instruments. That is one thing that the Juilliard program is really fantastic for. They bring in all of the top people in the field, all of the best conductors, all of the best musicians, um, and you really get to know them. And so I've ended up working with a number of them, on the other side, and
Oh,
that's really,
cool.
really fantastic. So yeah, I mean, I to say that I did put more work into, the work that I'm getting now than that, but um, yeah, it just all kind of fell together, and so it's been pretty good.
That's great because I know
Yeah.
I'm sure it's probably scary of when you're in school in New York going, how am I going to make this work after I graduate? Right? Is that everyone's
Yeah,
fear when you're in school in New York?
absolutely. And I think that, part of that is that New York just has so many people in it
Mm-hmm.
and so many musicians. Even in a, tiny little niche profession like early music, there's so many people.
Yeah.
So the thought definitely crosses your mind when you're in school in New York and you're thinking about where do I go now? The thought definitely crosses your mind, should I go somewhere else? Like maybe New York, I don't want to try to, fight to
Yeah.
make it here. Um, but I've been doing okay. I have to say though, I have been traveling a lot for work. Not far necessarily. I've been doing a lot of work on the East Coast, but that is, I think that's a component that freelance musicians, no matter what niche they are in, they find that that's kind of necessary.
Mm.
You kind of just have to go where the jobs are.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The freeway Philharmonic lifestyle.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in my car in the last 3 months.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
definitely get that. Yeah. So let's talk about your food blog. So, how did you get started blogging about food?
Um, so it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to condense it. So I was in college when I started food blogging, and I guess this was 2011 or so.
Okay. Was
And
it just like it was just a hobby? You were just like, hey, this is just something for fun you wanted to write about, or what caused you to go, this is something I want to do?
well, I think that was around the time when food blogs were really taking off and starting to become popular, and so I was reading a number of them. And I was appreciating, going online, finding a recipe that inspired me, and then going and making it.
Hmm.
And I've always been a really creative person. I love creative writing, photography, uh, just anything artistic. And of course, I loved cooking. So I was like, wow, okay, this is something I can do. And at the time when I was in college, I was in the middle of a huge weight loss journey. Not huge, but I lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
And uh, so at the time, I was sort of reteaching myself how to cook, um, so that I could be eating foods that I enjoyed, but that were also good for me and supporting my weight loss journey.
Yeah.
And so my blog kind of was an extension of that. It was me blogging about, things I discovered how to make and
Yeah,
things like
and so it
that.
was a little more personal than just, hey, I like this recipe, it's yummy. You were like, I'm also searching for a new way to eat. And so I'm
Right.
creating that in a way, was it like you were documenting that process along the way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think at the time that I started the blog, I hadn't lost 60 pounds yet. I think I'd probably only lost, 30. So the blog definitely helped me to be accountable to
Right.
myself. Um, but that was in the very early days. And, obviously my Instagram hadn't taken off yet. And I'm pretty sure it was just like my parents, maybe my aunt Like, maybe
Yeah.
my cats were reading over my parents' shoulders at home, Like, I don't really think anyone was paying attention to my blog, but it was a way for me to put all these experiences into a creative outlet.
Yeah. And anytime I think you start something, it's crickets out there. Nobody's paying attention for at least a year or two, right? I mean, when I started writing on
Yeah.
Crushing Classical, it was like, anybody out there? Like really.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, so go on.
Yeah, and so then after that, I did it purely as a hobby, and I wasn't really expecting anything to come out of it. But then when I guess this was a year or two after that, I was following this. This is when Instagram started to kind of take off. Not
Right.
mine, but just in general.
Hmm.
And I was following a bunch of fitness and health bloggers who were also food bloggers to some degree. And one of them held a contest, like a recipe contest. For I forget what the exact what the parameters of the contest were, but it was, create a healthy recipe and post it, and I'll repost my favorite one. So I posted a recipe. I think it was for like stuffed peppers or something. And she reposted it. And then I started getting more followers from that. And it wasn't a lot. I guess maybe it got me 100 more.
At this point, was your Instagram profile public, and were you like, I'm a food blogger? Or was it like, I play violin and I blog about food? Or what did it look like at that point?
I honestly could not tell you. I mean, I don't think I was advertising myself as a blogger.
Uh-huh.
I don't even think I'd really fully set up my blog yet. At the time, I was still functioning off of, I think, like Tumblr. I didn't have my website yet.
Right.
So it's possible that the link to my blog was in my profile, and that people were interested in seeing that. And I'm sure that I had food pictures on my Instagram because I was always Instagramming pictures of my food.
Mm-hmm.
As we all do.
I know, doesn't everyone? I'm like, I still do it too because I'm like, this is so yummy. I have to put a picture of it.
I know. I always feel like, even now, I'm that person in a restaurant where I'm like, hold on, everyone, don't eat yet. I gotta get up on the chair and I gotta get an overhead shot. But yeah, I hadn't really, created a brand yet, I guess. But these people, for some reason, were like, oh, hey, this girl's recipe looks good. I guess I'll go follow her. So that was one thing that sort of kickstarted my thought process about what could this be? And then I went and made an actual WordPress blog.
Okay. And was your
and
IG handle already Hungry Musician? Or did you make up that later?
So I was actually thinking about this earlier because I can't remember. Like, I think it's possible.
Okay.
It's possible that it was. Because it's been like that for as long as I can remember. I don't think it started out that way, but by that point, I think it was.
Okay.
And my Instagram's always been public, so I guess that helped a little bit. But yeah, so I got a domain name. I built a WordPress blog, and I started using better photography techniques, and I started experimenting with food styling and things like that. And it took a couple of years, even after that, like even into my first master's when I was first living in New York, I was still taking pictures on an iPhone.
Mm.
And then
those pictures didn't do as well, right?
I mean, they did okay. And honestly, I have to say, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think I did a pretty good job with what I had for a while. But it's very obvious the difference between pictures taken with, a proper DSLR and pictures taken with an iPhone.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I think that might have helped me a little bit. I also, I guess this was in like 2014, I started working with a recipe collective. called the Recipe Redux, which is a network of food bloggers that maybe don't exclusively focus on healthy eating, but for whom healthy eating is very important. And that was a really great network to be a part of. I built some, not a ton because I wasn't as active as the rest of the members, but I did build some, a nice rapport with a couple of the other bloggers. And it was a great source for getting connected with brands and sponsored posts and things like that.
Oh, okay. So has that happened
Yeah.
quite a bit or somewhat, or what? Give some examples of that.
So for example, I mean, I haven't posted on my blog in quite a while. We can get to that later. It's a whole separate issue. But
Yeah.
when I was active and I was doing these sponsored posts regularly, for example, one of the brands that partnered with this collective was Cabot Cheese. And they partnered with them pretty frequently. So this one time, they basically said, just make any recipe. It has to include this amount of our product. Sign up by this date. We'll send you free cheese. And who wouldn't want free cheese? So of course I signed up, and they literally sent me pounds of cheese. Like I got maybe like 8 or 9 blocks of different kinds of cheddar.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best when you're trying to lose weight, but at the same
I
time.
mean, yeah, at that point, I had already lost enough that I was like, okay, I know how to, ration this. So I think, and it didn't expire for a while because it was still in the package. So I think it took me, maybe a month or two to get through all. And, I used it in recipes. I used it as a snack, but it was like incredible. I was like, I can't believe I'm getting all this for free. And they're,
Yeah.
they didn't, with this collective in particular, they didn't really pay the people doing the recipes to create the recipes. They just sent free stuff.
But still, I think
yeah.
it's worth pointing out that there was a collective and there was like a community, that you were bigger together than by yourselves. So that caused brands to know who you were. So
Absolutely. And that's it was a really great way for me to connect with brands because, I don't know, as someone who was just starting out, I think that it would have been difficult for me otherwise to get their attention.
for sure.
Yeah.
What about now? Now that you have a significant following, have you had people like, pay you to post about a I don't know, a food product of some kind? I don't know.
I have not, but that's also, I think, partially because I haven't really been super active as a food blogger in the last year or so. But now that I'm out of school, I kind of took I chose to take a little hiatus from blogging because, in my last year at Juilliard and going into my freelancing career and all those things, I wanted to sort of focus on that for a while. And I felt that, as much as I loved blogging, it was just it needed to take a back seat for a while.
It's hard to, it's time consuming is all I'll say, right? Because
time consuming.
Yeah, because writing and then editing and making sure it's exactly how you want it to sound, it takes time.
There's also with food blogging, there's recipe development, there's recipe testing, then there's photography. And, that is a whole other animal on its own. So, yeah, I decided that for my own productivity in the music department, I kind of needed to put it on the back burner for a while.
Right.
But now that I'm out, it's been a very serious goal of mine to not only get the blog back up and running, but to make it something that can be a source of income as well as a hobby. Because it can be a very good source of income if it's done well.
Yeah.
So
So
we'll
that
see. Get back to me in, a year, and I'll let you know about the sponsored stuff I've been
Well,
doing
yeah, and I think
more.
we should definitely revisit in a year because that was one of the things that the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is because a lot of the things that I talk about on in my writing and with people on the podcast is multiple sources of income and also just building something that you can call your own. So regardless of if an orchestra calls you for this gig or that gig, or say you find out that someone else got called instead of you, and that kind of stuff always happens.
Mhm.
But regardless of your music career, you have something that you've built now that's yours. It's an asset, essentially. You can use this and you can grow it however you want because now you have an audience of people who pay attention to you not only for your recipes and your blogging about food, but as a violinist. So, because you're the hungry musician, so it's violin and food combined. And so, like, that's one of the things I asked you on our first interview, pre-recorded interview, not recorded interview, was if you ever thought about putting together some kind of event where you put on, a kind of concert and maybe a dinner or something like that. Did you think about that some more after we talked about it?
Absolutely. I think about that all the time, actually. And in fact, I don't actually remember if this was before or after our conversation, but I went to a music. It's not really a retreat, but I don't know if have you heard of Avaloq Farm?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically a place where chamber groups can go to develop a new program or to just work on stuff.
Hmm.
And usually there's several groups there at a time. And while I was there, I had some really interesting conversations with some people, both in my group and some people that I met, about how you could put such a thing together. It turns out I'm not the first person to think of this, unfortunately. So there's been some things like it already, like pairing cocktails with music or pairing hors d'oeuvres with music. But what I want to do eventually is, um, you know, make it a real culinary experience as well as a real musical experience and have the two be very connected.
Mm.
I don't really know how I'm going to go about doing that, but because
Yeah.
it's a complicated thing. You're like, do you want the eating to happen at the same time as the music? Because then, you'll really experience the two things together, but it might distract you from one might distract you from the other. Um, and, is it in a formal setting where it's like a dinner theater, or is it everyone is standing up and milling around? There's all these things you have to consider.
Do you
And
know what I envision? It doesn't matter what I think really, but but I like after we talked, I thought, okay, you're in New York City. There's Airbnb. There's Airbnb experiences. You could
right.
immediately say, I am hosting a small chamber music party for 5 people,
Hmm.
however many people you can fit in your apartment, and you teach them, you together make, you know, small appetizers, like those little bite-sized ones,
Hmm.
and you make like 5 of them, 5 different ones, and everyone learns how to make them, and you all eat together and have some wine, and then after that, everyone sits down, and the rest of your quartet comes, and you play a chamber music concert for them in your apartment. Like
Yeah,
that's something
yeah,
you could
that
do,
would be really lovely.
like you could do that this weekend. I mean, probably not this weekend. I mean, if you still have some Cabot cheese left over, you could have a cheese tasting. Well, maybe that was a few years ago. But like seriously, you could definitely do the kind of thing that you're talking about, but which sounds like something a little more elaborate, and maybe you would rent a space or find some kind of kitchen loft event type. I mean, everything exists in New York, so that probably exists. And then it would be
Hmm.
more people and a higher price. But like with Airbnb and that you're in New York, you could totally be like, I'm a professional food blogger and chef and a musician. And I'm offering you this boutique experience. It's very exclusive. Only a few people can fit in my apartment. And with Airbnb, you can see who it is. You could decline someone that looks creepy or whatever, you know, you
Right.
can, and it's so great. And this is what I love about building your own asset, because now you can point to, I'm the hungry musician on Instagram. You know, you're not just a random
Hmm.
person showing up on Airbnb. I'm going to cook some Kraft mac and cheese and play you a solo on my instrument. No, you're like, I'm hungry musician on Instagram. I've been food blogging since 2010, and this is what I specialize in, and blah blah blah. You know, I think
Hmm.
people are always looking for something unique to do. So, yeah, that could be a
That's
little
a really great idea. Yeah. I'll definitely,
think
I have
about
to look
it.
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like on your months when you're not as busy, you know,
Hmm.
on the freelancing stuff. Probably not this month, but you know, not
Yeah.
Christmas month.
Messiah season is upon us.
Exactly.
Yep.
But like that's what gets me so excited. First of all, when people live in cities that like you're always surrounded by tourists, you know.
Yep.
You didn't get Hamilton
Sure.
tickets tonight? Well, come up to my apartment instead and hear a string quartet or Baroque ensemble, or you know, you probably have a small place. Maybe the whole ensemble can't fit, but yeah,
Sure.
it seems so possible. I just think it's great, and I really wish that more people would. I mean, do you know any other musician friends who have hobbies that they could build a following around?
Yeah, I do. Um, I'm trying to think of specific examples.
You know, like I know this violinist who's really
Yeah.
into wine. And I was like,
Hmm.
why don't you start building yourself a presence about wine and tasting wine? And he lived in New York,
Right.
but he moved away from New York now. But like, I thought, like, this is another thing you could do. You could play solo Bach in your apartment and have a wine tasting, you know? And
Right.
what if you made as much as you did for a church gig,
Absolutely.
but you had more fun,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
So,
Yeah, I think that um, maybe the reason people don't think about this so much, or maybe the reason why people might be hesitant to do something like that, and certainly the reason that you know, whatever hesitations I have about monetizing my food blog, are because I love it so much, and it's really, it is a thing I do on the side, and um, I think that a worry that I have that possibly anyone who would try to monetize a hobby would have is that it would no longer feel like a hobby anymore, and it would start to feel like work. And I don't really know if I can speak to that yet because I haven't really, you know, hustled as a blogger
yeah.
yet. That's probably another thing I'm going to figure out as I, you know, try to make it a more of a side job, I guess.
Yeah, but the same thing
Um,
can happen as a musician. You know,
of course.
you start out loving it, and pretty soon you're like, ah, I really don't think I like the grind of driving 2 hours for $100 or whatever, you know.
Right. And the thing that, I always tell people when they ask me about, my blog is I say it's really, it's a creative outlet that isn't the creative outlet that I do for work. Because
Uh-huh.
when your job is creative, it's so easy to get burnt out.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really nice to have something you do on the side that is not that, but that is also creative.
Exactly. And what I love about the fact that it's food, everybody loves food. So like if you
Yeah.
were if you were to say, "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm putting on a string quartet concert this weekend." You could say, "I have a string quartet concert tonight. You want to come?" But if you say, "I have a string quartet and there's food and I made it," like that's a totally different story, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. If you tell anyone there's food,
Yeah.
they will show up.
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I think is just so fabulous about it, you know. So I wonder, have you thought about cookbook?
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about writing a cookbook ever since I started doing the blog. It's
Yeah.
definitely like a huge goal of mine. At some point, I really want to write a cookbook, and I think it's definitely within my wheelhouse. Like I could do all the photography, I could
Yeah.
write it, I wouldn't need to outsource, in other words.
Which is really cool.
I mean, it it might make a better quality book if I did, but I wouldn't have to. And so I think that it could be something that I could do, you know, perhaps relatively, you know, independently. Um, I wonder all the time about what it would look like. But I think that I'm still trying to find where my crossover as a food blogger and musician,
Yeah.
where that crossover is, because I feel that my audiences are kind of separate
Right.
at the moment. There is some crossover, obviously, people who like my music also like my food and vice versa. But I would really want my book to cater to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended. You know. Uh, so yeah, I guess I'll be keeping an eye out for that
Yeah.
too.
And sometimes it's hard to navigate and see outside your own box. Like, how do I make these two things work together? You
Yeah.
know? Do you think that the fact that you are a food blogger and so into cooking and food, does that affect your career outlook, like what you want to pursue as far as like art, or do you think, oh, if I were to go and get a job in an orchestra, then that would just totally be on the back burner? Or do you feel like, no, I definitely want to build a career where I've integrated both things?
At the moment, I'm feeling really motivated about making a career out of both things. I really wasn't sure when I graduated from Juilliard, because obviously I wasn't sure what I had a general idea of what my year was going to look like in terms of gigs and performances, and et cetera.
Yeah.
But I really had no idea, because a lot of the stuff, it just kind of comes up
Yeah.
as the year progresses. So, recently I've been really busy, like doing a lot of traveling, and I keep telling myself, "Oh, this is going to be the week when I post a blog recipe. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna photograph it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come back and do it now." And then, as the weeks have gone by and I've been traveling a lot, been working a lot, it just hasn't happened. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, I was like, okay, the second you have more than a week at home, you need to really like think about this and like focus on how to do it. And then, doing it can come later, but it's really about,
Planning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I guess a couple of months ago, if you'd asked me, do you want to, use your blog to make money? I would have said, I don't know. I think I just want to do it for fun. But now, as much as I love the freelance life, and it's great to travel, and it's nice to work with new people all the time, and I've been very fortunate that it's been working for me, and supporting me financially. But do I always want to be on the road performing?
Yeah.
Not when I have other things that I like to do at home that could also make me money.
Yeah.
It would be great if I could find a balance where I was still, active as a performer, and that was what I did for a living, but I also was able to make time to, do this on the side.
Yeah. And create, even if it was creating your own events that you got to play as well. And maybe
Right.
maybe you start building an audience around those kind of events, and then that's another income stream for you. So it seems like there's so many alternative income streams here. And not only that, I think what's exciting to me the most is like you're an example of somebody who started building something for fun and did it on the side while you were in school, and now that you're done, you have this audience. Regardless of what you do with it, even if you did nothing with it, so be it. But you have the choice to start from here as opposed to starting from zero. Where, some people might go, I'm going to wait till after I'm done with all this school craziness to start my other stuff that I really want to do. And then you'd be starting from zero. And we all know if anyone out there has tried to grow an Instagram audience, it takes a long time. I mean, you've been on there since 2010, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've been using Instagram actively since probably 2012.
Okay.
As a platform for growing my, audience, I guess.
Yeah. And so that's 7 years
Yeah.
of gradually growing a following of people who watch you play violin and do your gigs and whatever you post about there, and also the food stuff. So I think, it's just really great that you can point to that. You can say, here I am on Instagram, regardless of who the people are that are following you. You have people that are following you.
Right.
It's social proof. Like I've been doing that thing.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that the other day, actually. I was, I think about this all the time where I'm like, oh, I lost this number of followers, or, my overall growth is not what I want it to be. And, I need to do this and that. I'm like, but I still have 13,000 people who see what I post every day.
Yeah.
And I can use their, what's the word I'm looking for? I can use they're watching me, and I can use that to my advantage.
Their attention.
Their attention. Yes, thank you. I can't English today. Yeah. And going back to what you said about doing it while you're in school, I want to say that a number of the people who I look up to in terms of social media. So, for example, Drew Ford. I know you've had him on the podcast before. And, there are so many others who, while they were in school, they were building this following. And now that they're out, they have something like a jumping off point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly smart. I don't think that I necessarily was thinking that way.
Well, I think that's the best thing. I don't think Drew was either. I mean, he said he wasn't when he started. He was just a personal account, and he was posting selfies like anybody else.
Yeah.
But over time, and that's the key, is that it takes time. And you guys got in on the ground floor when Instagram was brand new, which is pretty good. It's even harder now when there's so many more people on the app. But I still think it's worth doing, and especially when you're in school, to be able to go through those 4 years, even if you're just documenting your experience in school. How beneficial would that be to somebody who's looking to go to a certain school or to go to any school? Like, if you're authentic and honest about what your experience is, maybe you can, you're contributing to your audience and telling them what it's really like,
Absolutely. I actually find that, I don't just find, I know that a very large portion of my followers on Instagram are younger, like high school age musicians. And I get probably the most messages I get are about applying to music school. And, people who are interested in making music their career, but they have questions about where to start, what schools to go to, how to audition, things like that. So for musicians who are trying to use social media to their advantage, I would also say know who your audience is and be willing to reach out to them and help them, and know what information they're looking for, and how you can benefit them.
And then keep giving them that.
Yeah, exactly. Because social media, it's not just about you.
Yeah.
Even though it can feel very much like that at times.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We should talk about that for a second, because I think a lot of times people misinterpret that the people that are following you because they want to know more about you. actually, that's only like a really small portion of it. They really want to know about you in terms of what that means for them.
Of course.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
watch Sarah the Hungry Musician because I want to see what it's like if I were to live in New York and play the violin and go to Juilliard. What would that look like for me? Well, I can see it through her eyes on Instagram. It's not like, "Oh, what's Sarah eating today?" Like,
Yeah.
it's not only because they want to know about you, they want to know about you and how that reflects back to them. I think if anyone can figure that out for themselves, all they have to do is think about how they're looking at other people when they're doing it. You know,
Right.
like, why
Hmm.
am I looking at this person? Do I care deeply about this actual person? Well, they're not my sister or my mom. They're just a person who happens to be in Paris. Oh, I don't care that you're in Paris. I care that you can show me Paris, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I think that's a really great point to think about as people if they're getting started, if they're in school, getting started on the app, what can that do for the people that are watching, you know?
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I had someone reach out to me the other day, or she posted she posted an image of something I posted on Facebook on her Instagram and was like, and tagged me in it, which was great because I kind of didn't put it on my Instagram because it was a meme, and those don't usually do as well. Not a meme, but like an image with a quote, and those don't
Yeah.
usually do as well. So I just leave them for Facebook usually. But she copied it and put it on there and tagged me and was like, "I love this quote" or whatever. And I clicked on her, and she's a clarinet student in Australia. I should tell what her name is so she can get credit. But she had like 16,000 followers or something
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
Yeah, Laura Clarinetist.
Huh.
She liked the quote, and she was like, I love your profile," and it was cool. Yeah, she has almost 15,000 followers. And she's a student in Australia. So it's funny how, like, I mean, who knows when she started, but I'm sure lots of other student clarinet players follow her just to see what's going on with clarinet. So I love it.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything that you'd like to promote coming up, like maybe in 2019, as far as what you're doing either on the blog or performing wise?
Um, Not very much performing wise. I mean, I've got lots of stuff coming up, but none of it is really, uh, super noteworthy, I guess. Um, but
Another
I,
pun, noteworthy.
I do it. I don't even know it. Oh God. I make way too many puns. Ask anyone I hang out with. They're like, Sarah needs to stop. Um, but I guess what I would say is, keep a lookout for my blog. It's thehungrymusician.com,
Okay.
with a the in front of it.
Okay.
Um, I'm really going to be trying my best to not just post about food, but to also, write about music things. And, going back to what we said before about, social media is to help other people. I feel recently, just because I haven't been putting so much effort into it, I've kind of been leaving my audience behind a little bit. And so I want to try to get them more involved and
They'll forgive you. I know they will.
yeah. So I guess to anyone who's listening to this, if you're already following me, or if want to follow me after this, I would say let me know what you want to see,
I love
recipe
it.
wise, music wise, whatever would help you. Let me know, because I'm not just doing this for my own health. Like I
Yeah.
have fun doing it, but I want to also reach people and make people happy.
That's
So
great. So I think that's a great idea to reach out. Everyone who's listening right now, you can follow Sarah, excuse me, on Instagram at Hungry Musician, right? With no the, right?
know that on Instagram.
Okay. And so they can direct message you. And I was thinking musicians get busy and eating healthy is hard. So this is a way that
Yeah.
you can totally contribute to musicians, like a post about how to gig and not eat at McDonald's.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
that
know?
is it's a skill for sure. It's
Yeah. I
so
mean, I ate
yeah.
there in my 20s. I
Hmm.
quit. I did quit eventually, but but yeah, it's hard because you got to eat something cheap and fast and on the way somewhere. So I'm
Right.
sure you have ideas of ways that people can avoid doing that, and that can contribute to musicians as well as anyone else on the go. So I just see so much potential. That's why I wanted to have you on because I just think it's so
Of
great.
course.
And my advice, and of course Sarah's advice too, is to get started on something while you're in school, right? Why not?
Yeah, because and this is going to sound weird because a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm in school, I don't have any time."
Hmm.
But the thing is when you're in school, it is true that a lot of the time it is just so busy and you really, just don't have time, but it's harder when you're working and you're trying to, and that's all you're doing, you
Yeah.
know?
I think you can always make time for
Yeah.
something. You can always make time for something that you really want to do.
Mhm.
If you say you don't have time, but you did watch Netflix today, then you have time.
Exactly. Like that's the thing, when I was in school and I had all this free time and I would spend it watching Netflix. It's like, well, I could be doing, my blog
Hmm.
instead. And so that's when I would get up, be like, okay, I'm gonna do a recipe today.
Yeah,
Um, so obviously it got harder when I was at Juilliard because I really was at school, for 12 hours a day. That's a separate issue. But you know, if you have even a little bit of free time, this is totally something within your reach. And yeah.
absolutely. And if
And
you want,
we're all on our phones all the time anyway,
right?
right? So, if you're going to be on your phone, you might as well be doing something that can be fun for you and help other people. So,
Exactly. And if you want inspiration, go follow Sarah at Hungry Musician. And awesome. I'm so excited to keep watching you, and we'll have to check back with you in a year and see um, how it's going. See if your cookbook's in the works. I know writing a book is a big undertaking, but just if you create any income streams or anything like that, we'll be curious to hear about it.
yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Sarah. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thanks.